It's my pleasure here to welcome now our panelists for our last session of today. So we have a panel around consulting firms and the PMO, strategic ally or temporary fix. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Robert Jocelyn, Ihab Morgan, Adam Skinner, and Zaid Al-Jabra on this panel. So I'll start with a brief introduction of each of our panelists, and then we can start with the questions. Dr. Robert, you've heard him speaking a lot today. Just for those who just joined us, he's a management consultant, instructor, and the founder of AI PMO. He's a professor at Alma Mater Europaeist University. He has more than 25 years of experience in the delivery of large-scale organizational transformation programs. He has designed and implemented hundreds of PMOs, and during this time evolved the PMO-specific methodology that formed the basis of AI PMO's PMO Strategic Lifecycle Framework. He has published books, book chapters, and research papers. He's a peer reviewer of 3 project management journals and is in the process of co-authoring IPMO's body of knowledge, which comprises several books. So welcome, Dr. Robert, again.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Ihab Morgan, he's director at PwC. He's a global PMO program and transformation leader with 20 plus years of experience. He specializes in transforming business functions into cohesive units and orchestrates larger scale strategic programs and leads multi-million-dollar strategy. Yes? Can you hear me too?
Yes, we can, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So Ihab has rallied cross-functional, geographically dispersed teams of 15 to 200 plus individuals and influenced the buy-in of C-suite executives across Europe, Australia, and the GCC. Skilled in complex stakeholder management, cultivating strategic partnerships, and delivering sustainable results. Ihab's specialties includes PMOs, project management, change management, OKRs, digital transformation, and strategy, among others. So welcome again, Ihab. Adam Skinner, welcome. Adam Skinner, he's a chief consulting officer at Deacon. You've heard him speaking also earlier today. He's an award-winning European Deacon Consulting and award-winning European commercial procurement and transformation consultancy. In this role, he oversees the consulting community, offering support to clients. He's a member of the senior lead team. Adam leads the APM's portfolio interest group and is a published author who regularly speaks on scaled agile PMO portfolio management and digital transformation. He's also a certified chartered project professional, CHPP. He holds a Master of Science in Major Program Management from Oxford University and in Applied Psychology from Cranfield University. He's also a SAFE consultant and AI PMO trained. Outside of work, Adam is an avid reader and coaches rugby at rugby football clubs. Welcome, Adam.
I'm not sure if Adam, I just messaged him, he needs to come on. Maybe Ritu, you can message him to get him on.
He was earlier here, so okay. Zaid Al-Jabra, he's the CEO of IPMO Consulting KSA. He brings over 25 years of rich experience in strategy development, execution, and establishing and managing strategy and project management offices. With a strong information technology and organizational development foundation, he has led complex transformation across various sectors, including real estate, financial services, healthcare, telecommunication, and the public sector. Zaid holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals and a master's degree in management of information technology from Sunderland University. Zaid is recognized for his expertise to several certifications, including PMP, RMP, Master Balance Scorecard Professional, and PMO Certified Expert. So welcome to all of you. And you can start with some questions. Okay, so I would like to start with the first question for you, Ihab. When do consulting firms normally get brought into organizations? Is it when a PMO is failing or when the organization proactively wants to establish one? Which ones have you seen more through your engagements with clients?
Hi, Nancy, and hi, everyone connecting remotely to this event. And thanks for having me today. And it's a pleasure to participate in this panel along with my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Robert, Adam, and Zaid. Now back to your question, which is, as usual, a great one to start with. And it's one we actually see both sides of at PwC. So often consulting firms, they bring us in when a PMO is failing. And where projects are delayed, where the governance is weak, or the leadership has already lost confidence. And in those situations, we are called in almost like PMO firefighters. We try to do a quick assessment, stabilize the basics, and rebuild the credibility through quick wins. But while this is important, it's always a reactive approach. And sometimes it's harder to reverse damage once the stakeholders' trust is lost. Now, the more strategic clients bring us in proactively before the PMO even exists, or when they are planning a transformation. And that's where we deliver the most long-term value. We help in that case, or most consulting firms, they help in that case define the PMO's mandate, the target operating model, the governance and the KPIs, and all those tailored to the organization's strategy. And this approach, the second approach, sets up the PMO as a value driver from day one. And what's really interesting is that many PMOs actually start as a temporary fix. But the organizations that succeed are the ones that evolve them into long-term strategic assets. And consulting firms can definitely guide that journey. So whether it's fixing what's broken or building from scratch, it really comes down to intent. If the organization sees the PMO as just a box to tick, then the impact will be very limited. But if it sees it as a system to architect, to evolve, and also to sustain, then bringing in the right consulting partner at an early stage makes all the difference in that case.
Thank you very much for your answer, Ihab. And I like the fact that you mentioned intent. So it's very important to know what we need right from the PMO and how to support the PMO to evolve to what it should be to deliver value to the organization. So thank you for that. And I like the fact that you mentioned firefighters. So unfortunately, yes, organizations are usually in firefighter modes when they call for support. So unfortunately, I hope that this will change in the future. So Dr. Robert, my question to you here today, how important is it to build PMOs using robust, proven frameworks so they can adapt and evolve over time? And how does this separate leading consulting firms from the rest? And I think we have gradually started introducing a little bit the need for frameworks and methodologies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for the question. As you know, AI PMO has developed everything on frameworks. Just like when you're looking at a building, you build the structures of the building or the foundations, etc. And it's no different or whether something is physically built or is built, and we call it like a social construct. PMOs don't really exist, and just the people and the processes that actually operate them. So frameworks really matter, because if you don't actually provide the structure, you're not going to be able to understand what actually happens and why it actually happens. But structures doesn't actually mean rigidity. It actually means flexibility. So when you're bringing consultants in, they will have experience of using different frameworks. They don't offer just one size fits all. They use adaptable models depending on what needs to be applied. But all these models actually have feedback loops. So they look at services, service reviews, decisions, governance, etc. And also how you actually have PMOs working together in an operating model. So these allow PMOs to evolve. And that's a really important word, is that PMOs are about adaptability and evolution, where projects are more about repeatability. So with these right frameworks, you can actually evolve as the needs change, because if you don't, you'll become irrelevant. So this is something that is incredibly important, to make sure that you use the right frameworks. And as Ihab said, it's far better to do it at the beginning on the design and the build than it is to come in and try to sort a problem out, which is much, much harder. So use frameworks for both, ideally design and build, but of course you can use frameworks to actually understand where the problem is if a PMO has gone wrong, and then actually from that point to adapt accordingly, so it does fit into a structure that can evolve and adapt.
Thank you for your answer. I think as we start talking about design and delivery, I would like to address my second question to Zaid. Zaid, you've worked many years in PMOs, and you've seen different examples. Do you believe consulting firms are designing PMOs that match the organization's actual capabilities, or are we seeing more of a design delivery mismatch?
Firstly, good afternoon, everyone. It's a truly pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel. This is a very critical question, especially for me as I'm working as a consulting. In many cases, unfortunately, there is indeed a noticeable design delivery mismatch. Consulting firms often propose sophisticated PMO models that may reflect level 4 or 5 maturity. These designs may look impressive on paper and presentations, but they frequently overlook the actual operational maturity, resource availability, and internal competencies of the client organization, many of which operate on level 1 or 2 maturity. As a result of these misalignments, typically emerge after the consulting engagement ends. The internal teams are left trying to implement and sustain a PMO structure that is simply too advanced for their current state. This leads to frustration, low adoption, and it may goes to fail. To address this issue, I believe we need a more pragmatic and adaptive approach, one that emphasizes co-creation with the client and prioritize stage development. Rather than imposing a rigid model, consultants should facilitate the design of a PMO that is responsive to the client's current capabilities, culture, and strategic needs. The chosen framework should allow the PMO to mature incrementally, providing the organization with a clear roadmap for growth and the ability to scale up its governance and project management practices over time. Ultimately, a PMO must be a living structure. It's flexible enough to evolve as the organization evolves. If it is not designed with adaptability and conceptual relevance in mind, it risks becoming obsolete or ineffective. The most successful PMOs are those that are tailored, scalable, and deeply integrated into the organization's way of working.
Thank you for your answer. And I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned co-creation with clients. I think this is one of the missing pieces in a lot of consulting projects, is that we don't spend enough time trying to understand the context of the organization, its own systems, its own internal politics. That's why sometimes we fail to give the right solution. And to provide flexibility and not be that rigid, I think it's very important. And tailoring the frameworks and to the need of the organization is also, I think, very important. Thank you, Zaid, for your answer. And if please, any of the panelists, if you'd like to add to the answers of your colleagues, you just chime in. Robert, might go back to you now with the question about, again, the multi-PMO environments. So this is a complex environment, right? Multi-PMO have very complex setups. What mechanisms are needed to prevent PMOs from operating in silos? And should these be built into the consulting deliverables?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. So just actually the reflection point from what Zaid and also Ihab said is that co-creation, being involved from the beginning, that's really important. I actually did a social science or a natural science pre-study where if you make a mistake in nature, you'll about be dead. Some other animal kills you. In our world, you make a mistake in the design of a PMO, okay, you cause pain and grief, but the problem is the pain and grief is actually, it hits individuals. So really I want to emphasize is that, and this is probably the Swiss way, and we have an expression, we say the Swiss get up early but wake up late. They take their time to do something, but when they do it correctly. And I think that when you actually are looking at building something as important as if it's an initiative specific project, whether it's a mega project, what I spoke about, you really need to be very careful and consider the whole design, like you do a car or like an aircraft. You wouldn't expect them not to be designed properly because they fall out of the sky. So co-creation is really important. Going to the multi-project environment, there's a lot that's written about sort of single PMOs, but we know that teamwork is really important. And the same as well, PMOs working in teams, that's really important. You don't need to argue that. So the mechanisms that need to be in place, really, if you're working in a team, we talk about an operating model. How do you operate? And in the operations world, we know there are processes, they've got functions, etc. In the project world, we don't really have this sort of the definition of the functions. It's really the operating model that adapts and adjusts according to what is actually required, both in the sort of the project portfolio environment and also the PMO side. So this model you have needs to unify, has to have a unifying model part of it, bringing things together. So looking at service definitions, looking at governance, information sharing, the technology, sort of future looking as to what you should actually include. And consultants, we did a piece of work actually before this talk, and we looked at the complexity of building and designing and the competence levels. And Zaid was actually mentioning that about the different levels. It is incredibly complex to actually design an operating model. I did one with a couple of other guys. It took us 3 months on 30 PMOs. Very complex, looking at the services, looking at where the PMOs are placed, looking at the governance overlay, etc. So this is where you really need to bring experts in. People don't normally design that many PMOs themselves unless you're a consultant and you've got a lot of experience. Practice makes perfect. So bring in the consultants who know what they're doing, use proven frameworks, and they know about operating models as part of the engagement. Don't look at standalone charters, look at ones that are combined together. And if you don't have these mechanisms, the risk is you will actually find that PMOs will drift into their own silos, and they'll do fragmented reporting, and they won't necessarily share information or know how to share between themselves, whether it's information or whether it's competencies and capabilities.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I think it's important really to look at the design, but I would like to start a little bit now looking at the future of the PMOs. So Ihab, my question to you would be, what are the best practices that are needed for sustaining PMO maturity post-consultancy? So once the consultant finishes their work, they design a solution, but there's a big responsibility that lies on the team, right, to continue that. So what are the practices that are needed there?
I think the real test of any consulting engagement is simply what happens after the consultants have left the building. We often see that great frameworks or tools have been delivered, but again, without a clear plan for sustainability, those gains usually fade very fast. And that's why we always emphasize that sustainability must be built into the engagement from day one and not just treated as an afterthought. And first, for example, we need to have a structured and deliberate knowledge transfer. So that means things like workshops, hands-on coaching, and assigning internal champions to own the PMO, the newly designed PMO operating model going forward. And it's not just enough to receive, because the client's team has to internalize and lead the newly designed PMO. Another thing is to maintain a services roadmap. KPIs have to be reviewed on a quarterly or on a regular basis to ensure that the PMO doesn't drift or stall, and that it keeps evolving over time. And also don't forget things like governance. So you have to institutionalize.
They cut out.
Yeah, I was thinking it's not only me then.
Sorry, I was put on mute. Sorry about that. So I was just saying, things like governance, you have to institutionalize what has been built. For example, if we talk about new dashboards or portfolio reviews, or governance frameworks that have been introduced, you have to make them part of policy and not just practice. They have to be standardized, they have to be audited, they have to be improved on a regular basis. And an even better approach is to schedule annual or biannual PMO maturity and impact assessments, just to keep a pulse on whether the PMO is still aligned with its intended value. Another thing also is, even after the main engagement ends, we always recommend our clients to retain what we call a light touch advisory support a few days a year, just to keep bringing the consultants a few days a year, just to, again, to maintain that light touch advisory. So, and above all, and just to wrap up, always treat the PMO like a system or a journey and not just a project, because projects end while systems continuous tuning. So put in place a roadmap for the next 12 or 24 months. And if needed, again, as I said, keep a light touch mentorship model with the consulting partner. And that way the PMO matures and adapts and continues to value.
Thank you. And I think from your answer, we understand that there's a lot that the PMO needs to do after the consultancy is over, right? So the work doesn't stop, it needs to continue. Otherwise, the value will not be really obtained. So thank you, Ihab, for your answer. I'd like to move now to Adam. Adam, we haven't given you this floor yet. So my question to you would be about what does a future-ready PMO look like in today's AI, automation, and outcome-based value environment?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I mean, the world is changing so incredibly rapidly. Almost any area is being impacted by kind of AI and technology. But there's that. I was saying, of course, the more the world changes, the more it stays the same. And technology is really just an enabler to drive efficiency and effectiveness. So you always still come back to the question of, well, efficient what? Effective what? So the very first thing anybody needs to be future ready is some kind of roadmap, some kind of service understanding of what their business is supposed to be doing and where it's supposed to be going. If you don't have that, there's no point doing anything else. So as long as you've got that service roadmap, then you can start to work out actually how better can you automate that. And use tool to do that. The next thing you need is, rather than a very specific off-the-shelf tool, is a genuine understanding of the art of the possible in this space. So that comes down to really understanding, what can we do with modern technology? And I'm a big fan of having kind of one or two people in each PMO or in each consulting assignments who I consider my kind of my future tech people. Who they don't have specific background. They're just people who are excited by this stuff. So they're people who've played around with low code or messed around with Power BI or have got a free course around whatever it is, conversational AI. People who kind of get excited about this. And actually, if you can link them then into the service roadmap, you start to see, well, where can we take this and what should we be trying to do? So it's about having those kind of people who really do get excited about it and want to keep moving you forward along the service roadmap. And the final thing you really need is people excited in your team about the art of the possible. And this goes for any future focused piece of work. It's about having people who are not going to put blockers in the way just because they can put blockers. So what I like to try and do in that case is make sure everybody has a low-level knowledge of technology, that we kind of have regular sessions where we look at the journey we're trying to take the organization on. And so everyone knows we are trying to go on this journey and everyone is kind of comfortable with that stuff. There's a wonderful book called Creativity Inc. And it's by the chap who set up DreamWorks. And it's not particularly tech focused, but it's really about creativity and the excitement about kind of pushing the world forward. And I think in whatever environment you're in, if you've got a community who are excited about what's coming next, if they know the general direction they're going in, and if there's someone who can help them on that journey, then you've got a real chance there to get a grip with the future and take it forward. Is that okay?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think there's a lot also to learn there in that space for PMOs to be able to adopt new technologies, be able to be, really future focused. So thank you very much for your answer, Adam. I would like to move now again to Zaid. Zaid, my question is more around the risks of designing and building a PMO in-house. Now, from all the discussion that we've had already, it's important, I think, to get the right support to design to build PMOs. What are the competencies required to build a PMO, and how can we really have that in organization if we just focus on in-house? What the consultant is bringing from the outside?
Yes, actually, if I'm talking about the risks of designing and building PMO in-house, I believe there are several significant risks. Particularly if the organization lacks prior experience or a structured methodology for such an initiative. One of the risks is the presence of, let's call it, organizational blind spots. Internal teams, no matter how experienced, may struggle to see beyond the existing structure, constraints, or even legacy practices. this can limit their ability to implement a strategic or transformational change. Another major concern is the lack of objectivity. Internal staff are often deeply embedded on the organization politics, power structures, and informal networks. As a result, their ability to make impartial decisions, like anything around governance, performance, accountability, may be compromised. This lack of neutrality can lead to a PMO design that appeases stakeholders rather than drives a real value. Additionally, in-house teams may fall into a trap of insular thinking or narrow thinking, relying heavily on past practices or limited exposure to industry-wide PMO frameworks and emerging best practices. Without access to a broader perspective, such as what an experienced external consultant might bring, they risk reinventing the wheel or designing a PMO that lacks the agility and scalability needed in today's dynamic environments. So perhaps most critically, internal teams may underestimate the level of strategic alignment, governance discipline, and change management effort required to establish an effective PMO. Without a robust and proven framework, and without the benefit of an external challenge function, the PMO may become structurally weak or politically maybe compromised, or even operationally maybe inactive. Therefore, while in-house PMO development is certainly possible and in some contexts advisable, but it must be approached with a lot of caution, humility, and ideally with selective external support that brings objectivity, methodological rigor, and a broader strategic lens.
Thank you, and I think that's a great answer. And this takes me to my next question. I would like to ask Adam. Adam, we spoke about AI and the need to be future ready. We were talking with Zaid on the competencies of the PMO and why it's important sometimes to have that to have an external support. If we go back to AI and data analytics, where do you see? I mean, what competencies are required for the PMOs in the future when it comes to its people, culture? What are the elements that we could bring here into the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, you know, AI is a very sort of passed around term. I prefer the kind of term analytics, and for me that's when a system can look at large patterns of data and tell you something you don't already know about it. And that's kind of how I tag it. I think of kind of automation and low code as an efficiency driver, and I think of AI as an effectiveness driver. What that essentially means is any of your services where you're trying to make decisions across large amounts of data, something like AI should be effective. Listen, that's not usually AI, but let's use the term analytics, should be effective. I think the real trick is having clear and aligned data. So if you look at the sort of the data journey from, you've got to decide what the data set is. You've got to B, make sure it's nice and clean and all properly mapped out so it can talk to each other. Then you've got to kind of C, run your systems over it and have a testing set of data to check that actually when it points to an error, and it's not hallucinating, it's coming up with kind of true positives. So there's quite a lot of work in getting all of that aligned. I used to speculate, this was 5 years ago, it's pre-COVID, I speculated that there would be the need for a PMO data analyst. It would just be a classic role. You'd have the PMO data person, really the person who'd sit in the PMO and just keep the data clean and do clever stuff with it to point out where errors are. I haven't seen that yet, but I'd also say I haven't actually seen the killer user case yet for AI in the PMO. I attended session about a month ago with the APM and the IPA, which is the UK's infrastructure, basically the bit of the UK government that worries about big scale change. They've done a lot of work into data, and they talked about they've got a data standard that they've just rolled out. And actually, the big thing that came out of that was nobody could define the killer user case for AI. That means everybody's just going to go out and buy the tool because everybody has to have it. I don't think we're too far away, actually, and I think it's probably going to be something around the planning space. I think it's probably going to be something that actually looks at lots and lots of milestones and tells us, where things are going to go wrong because there's enough data that is properly mapped out there to compare it to. But I've not yet seen the tool that does that. That's a very long-winded way of saying, I think you just need generic data capability tools at the moment until someone comes up with a thing that's going to change the way we do PMO, and then you need to charge for that as fast as you possibly can.
Great. So there's still a lot to do. I think hopefully next year in our next edition, we'll bring something new to everyone. So thank you, Adam, for your answer. Robert, I just want to go back and ask you a little bit about if organizations want to engage a consulting partner, what's the best way to do that? How can that be done in an effective manner? Because also sometimes we might not find the right fit for as a consultant partner for organizations. So how to do that effectively?
Oh, this is a difficult one. Yeah. Actually, Adam, I like your response. You talked about the art of the possible. So maybe the art of the possible actually hasn't hit with the AI understanding about the next thing with AI regarding project portfolio management. So to the question regarding about how to choose a good consulting company, is that the question?
Yep. Yes.
I think perhaps the first thing is you want to find the consulting companies challenge you. So you have ideas. You don't have one that just says, look, just take this, but challenge your thinking. I think that's the first thing, rather than just say, okay, this is what we're going to go and put in there. You need to make sure that you see the consultants, they understand that they're involved, as I think Ehab was saying, not just as installers of one thing, but as a system. I think you were saying, Ehab, yeah? So as a system, and actually PMOs have a life and they evolve. So it's choosing consultants that actually understand that. That's really important. Looking at ones that actually have frameworks, they don't just take something that's a simplistic view. A framework, in fact, there's probably multiple frameworks, is they can explain that to you. They can explain how they're going about something and what they're going to do. Just like when you go to an operation, you're actually told what's going to happen and how they're going to go and do it. And I think that should be the same as well when you're actually in the PMO. So you understand the journey that you're going to go on with the consultants as they progress through the various phases of wherever you're actually at on the project. They should also look at sustainability. Sustainability, I think, is in everybody's heart. Living in Switzerland, I remember my village, we were CO2 neutral back in 2007. We could take decisions that allow us to do that. In my street, it was a private street. We all paid extra to have all our lights changed. All of us heat pumps, we've got solar systems. And I think there's a number of decisions you want to take. And I think a good consultant will actually help you take those decisions on your services that you're going to go and offer. So it's really like a consultative view, I guess. Look at ones that actually not just talk, but actually teach. Of course, I'm biased because I go and teach, but I never was. I was actually an engineer. I'm a chartered engineer. I grew up at a young age working in my father's workshop. I always look at the practical side. So people say I'm academic. I've learned to understand that side, but everything I do and everything a consultant should do should actually be applicable, but he can explain that from a concept or from an approach, whether it's from frameworks or whether they're teachers on the topic, if they've published books, papers, etc. Like Adam, he presents at conferences. Ehab does the same as well. In fact, you, Nancy, all of us do. I think you actually want to look at consultants that have gone the extra mile and have actually been recognized for the work they've done. I think that's all a good sort of formula to actually start to then look at selecting the consultants and the organization behind the consultants.
Thank you. And you started talking about challenges, right? And the consulting being able, right, to challenge, I think, what's going on in organization. I think part of that is to have to involve the clients, and sometimes clients doesn't really want to be part of the solution. They just want to get it, and they want really to apply it. So I think there's a lot of joint work that needs to happen for great solutions. Thank you very much for your answer, Robert. I have one more question for all of you at the end before we start wrapping up the session, which I would like to hear each of you answer it. So the question, I'm gonna say it to all of you, but then when each one of you when is ready, please just chime in and answer. If you could change one thing about how organizations use consulting firms and the PMO lifecycle, what would it be? So if each one of you can share one of things that you think consulting firms could really add value to.
Who wants to start?
Can I
Yeah, I'll
start?
start.
You can start, Robert. Yes,
Okay.
please.
I think this goes back to the point what Ihab was talking about. Don't just see as consultants of just doing, so like the term installers, engage them. And I think that's the reflective point Zaid said as well, is engagement from the beginning, co-creators, and that's also the theme that I went through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, who would like to? Yes.
I can also add to that. So basically, treat the consultant as a partner. And also, I think this also goes both ways. So the consulting firm has also to engage with the client, not just to deliver a service, and earn money, good money, but rather to become a partner, a real partner who's accountable and responsible for the success of the design and the operation of the PMO. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to make sure that after you operate the PMO, that it's transferred internally smoothly to the client people, and they have proper knowledge transfer. And you also you keep a regular contact with your client to make sure that everything that you have worked on, that you have put all your effort into, is actually bringing value to the organization.
Absolutely, and it's a shared responsibility at the end, the success of the project, right? So thank you, Ihab. Zaid?
Yes. Actually, the first point, which is the co-creation, we mentioned many times. At the same time, I believe there is two phases: the phase of designing and operating, then the handover. I believe there is something which we call it like a post handover. There should be involvement for the consultant, perhaps involving 5 to 10 consulting days per quarter, 2-3 days per month, can offer invaluable benefits. Actually, this periodic engagement allows consultants to help the internal PMO team assess the progress against the original objectives, address early warning signs, validate the application of the methodologies. I believe this it could be the involvement just a more strategic and light touch advisory rather than ongoing operational control. I believe these two major factors could help a lot in delivering the right PMO.
Great, thank you, Zaid. Adam?
Well, for me, it's a simple one. I'd like to be called in at the beginning before things are broken. So I do sometimes, because of financial considerations, you tend to get called in a consultant when it's already broken, burning down. And how much more sensible, how much more kind of, well, let's use the word mature. If everybody accepts we don't have the capability, there is going to be some support needed to get to a good place. Let's engage early, get that done, and guarantee it will cost less. Come in early rather than trying to fix something forever. So that would be my number one plea.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'd like to turn it to the audience. Do we have any questions, Bara, from the audience? Okay.
No, we don't have any questions for now.
Okay. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your great insights, for your valuable input into this discussion. Thank you very much, Ihab, Robert, Zaid, and Adam for your input. And it's all about the art of the possible, right? So thank you very much, and hope to see you again in different forums.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, as well,
so
for
much.
moderating.
Thank you,
this.
everyone.
Today.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for listening as well. Bye for
Thank
now.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.